Ladies and gentlemen, the motion picture you are about to see contains an evil spell, as used by practitioners of witchcraft for centuries. I am now about to dispel all evil spirits. O creator of Hecate, Damkina, Marduk's messenger, hold all your powers and those of your do-bidders and their familiars, and cast a protecting shield above those gathered here present. And now, with a free mind and a protected soul, we ask you to enjoy this performance.
Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Welcome to the movie show with Joel and Ryan and Michael and Rob. We're all here. That's right. Okay. Hi. Welcome to the movie show with Joel and Ryan. I'm Joel.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Michael.
I'm Rob.
And that's right. We have the super spectacular or super spooktacular Halloween episode. Yay! Woo-hoo! All right, friends. Okay, so the this year, because we're coming up on our anniversary again, Ryan. You know that we kind of started around a Halloween episode.
Yep.
And
that is true.
And jumped right in, I believe, with movie Monsters, and then we what were some of our other Halloween ones? I think we did classic. Did we do the Universal classic monsters?
Yep.
So we have so we had to assemble for this year, because we're in year 4. We had to assemble a blue ribbon panel of spookiness to make sure that we could we were constantly looking to evolve, constantly looking to improve. And now we got Michael and Rob and Ryan and Joel, and not just, hey, well, let's maybe pick a movie and we'll all talk about it, or maybe let's pick a couple movies. No. What we did this year, thanks to Rob, this was Rob's, we have Rob to blame for this, Rob to thank for this, is that this year we are doing spooky double features. Oh, that's the wrong boo. Oh, it's always nice when you screw up your sound effects.
Wasn't there supposed to be theremin somewhere?
Yes, I hit the wrong buttons.
Just checking. It seemed like we spent an inordinate amount of time for that little bit of theremin.
We absolutely did, and I blew it. And so that's my trick instead of a treat.
We all make mistakes. Rob and Michael came on the movie show with Joel and Ryan, so there you go.
There it is. All right,
It
so
happens.
I don't remember how this, Rob, your original thinking behind this, and how it all came about, but we ended up choosing. We each ended up choosing what would be a great Halloweenish, spooky double feature. Talk a little bit more about double features, Rob.
Well, actually, this double feature in particular, I've been trying to get on the show for about 2 years, I think. Probably since the first time Ryan asked, hey, you got any ideas that you'd like to come on and talk about? So once we did our first double feature episode where we talked about Somewhere in Time and Time After Time.
Oh yeah.
It seemed like a good idea, like if we did like we did with the Stephen King, where we had the four of us on and each picked a double feature. I've actually shown my two films together as double features several times, introducing new people to them.
Did anybody watch any of these as double features? I watched them all as double features, like very strictly.
Yeah, I did most of them.
Yeah. Ryan's was the night and then the next morning, but
yeah,
the other two were back to back. Yeah,
I watched them like I didn't watch them consecutively on the same night, but I watched them over a series of nights, one after the other, one after the other. So I did, with the exception of Ryan's, because I needed to get Rob's in there, and I knew I could watch Ryan's streaming. So we'll get to these in just a moment. So that's the tease, folks, is we have 8 films that we are talking about today. And we're not going to go blow by blow, death by death, bite by bite. But we're gonna, we want to get into these and we're going to talk about not only the movies themselves, but why they either work or do not work as double features. We each came up with these double features, told them to each other, and then we said, off we go, let's watch them and then talk about them. And so we're chronologically, and because it was Rob's idea, it happens to work out really effectively that our first movie, our first double feature, I guess I'll announce them as double features, and then we'll talk about the movies, each one. The first one, Rob's choices were Night of the Demon and Burn Witch Burn.
AKA Curse of the Demon, AKA
Night of the Eagle.
Yeah. So I picked a double feature of AKA films, also known as. The first one, Curse of the Demon, is the U.S. title, and it existed or was seen most frequently, usually with that title and an 82-minute cut. It was thought that the 95-minute cut, the original British cut under the name Night of the Demon, was lost. And there's actually a really interesting story about how that was saved and preserved and became available on video, which maybe on the Facebook page,
tell us real quick if it's so interesting. Sum it up.
Well, okay, so
I'm happy to post whatever you want on the Facebook page,
who was in charge of film elements, and as they came down to be transferred for video, he came across this longer cut, which he thought, oh, this is really interesting. So he noted that it existed, and then when they were and they put it out on VHS, I think, when DVD was coming out, he was working there again, and those elements, they said pull the elements for this. And he did, and the longer cut was missing. But he is like, no, you got to have the longer cut. So he's trying to find it and everything, and he only has so much time to find these things, and so eventually he thought he was just going to have to send it out. He mentioned to a collector friend of his that the trouble he was having with that, and he said, got silent, and the collector said, I own that print.
Nice.
So, but that's tricky, because if a studio knows you own that print, even if you bought it from someone legitimately, which he thought he had, they'll just try and seize it. And the guy paid a lot of money for it. So they sort of worked out a behind the scenes deal, and thus now it's available. But It was almost lost.
They're not that different, the different versions, obviously, but I was grateful to be able to watch the longer one. And
I saw the longer one as well, and I'm curious, what are the major? I mean, that's what 13
minutes.
13 minutes.
Yeah.
So of a 90-something minute movie too, not 13 minutes of a 2.5 hour movie.
Right. So what are the big shifts? What are the big changes?
I think one of the big ones that I'm aware of is when he goes to the farmhouse. the family's farmhouse to get their consent. I think that's just gone completely.
Interesting. I thought that was one of the creepiest moments.
Yeah, I know.
It is. Although you can, and this is the decisions that are made for these reasons.
Yeah.
You can pluck it right out of the movie
Sure.
and not make a lick of difference. But I'm with you. I thought that scene was very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure what all the others are. I started watching a special feature on the differences in the cuts, and I didn't really want to go through every cut. I never intend to watch the shorter version. I love the long version. But it's a film I came to kind of late, probably about 8 years ago. I was reading, like, in some magazine, the top horror films of all time or whatever, and came across this and I'd never heard of it. So I tracked it down on DVD at the time, and I just love it. I think it's a fantastic film.
I'll go further than that. I'll tie these together. It's a great double feature in that it really is about it's very tricky. They're both tricky thematically, and they're about the power of belief and the power of disbelief, both, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And how those things can curse you or bless you in different ways, which I thought was super cool. They're very, very much thematically like they're almost structurally the same movie, but really different though, different viewing experiences altogether. But I like Night of the Demon a lot. I love we're going to try and talk about these without spoiling the big moments or the big turns. It's okay to spoil one or two as we go, but Rob's big deal was we want to pitch these double features to the audience so they can watch them without feeling like they've had it all every second completely analyzed. But for Night of the Demon, I'll just say, because it does happen relatively early in the film.
Yeah.
The reverse smoke effect.
Oh my God.
Demon effects are
so good.
That was amazing.
Off the charts cool. Like
really super
cool.
That sound effect, I'm like, what in God's name is that? Because it sounds like a carriage creaking.
It's a squeaky, it sounded like a squeaky wheel, which I thought was
great.
And they used that later in a great way. Yeah. I mean, we should mention that these, the Night of the Demon is from 1957.
Yep.
And Burn is 1962. 60. Oh, I got the
1962.
Wrong. Yep, 1962. Yep. Shoot, hold on again.
And we've talked about on the show before how from 1945 to 1966, 67 or so, it's pretty much the 50s. These are very much, especially cinematically, these are very much 50s films, but in a really great way. There's that, they're not morality tales like when we talked about Creepshow or whatever, but there's very much this, there's always a lesson to be learned, a hard lesson to be learned in these. Like that's something that all the films of the era have, whether it's a ghost story or whether it's a giant biblical epic, you know what I mean? Our heroes all need to learn a very important lesson by the time it's over with. And it feels quaint because it's also on the surface compared to what we're used to. We're used to them eschewing that altogether, or if it's there, it's a sort of subtle thing that's thread throughout, But I dug that about these two. Plus just fantastic atmosphere, really beautiful black and white photography for both films.
Well, really solid performances too. Like Dana Andrews, I think this is the first, all I know is from him in the song in the Rocky Horror Picture Show mention, like the song, that's all I have to go off of. But I thought he was really strong. I mean, I loved the character. He's such a dick.
So real quick, if you can, Rob, brief synopsis on both of these films, really brief, like a couple of sentences if you can manage.
Yeah. So Curse of the Demon, Dana Andrews plays a professor who comes over for a conference on parapsychology and to help try and unmask this leader of a demon cult or something, Julian Carswell. The guy he's come over to help is killed at the beginning of the film before he arrives. So when he comes, Carswell tries to dissuade him from trying to expose him. He says that won't happen. So Carswell passes on these runes, which give him a curse. And so the whole film is about Dana Andrews' character not believing in any of that, trying to dispel it, but slowly realizing that
The curse of the demon is real.
Yep.
Yes. And
spoiler alert.
Right.
Yeah, and Burn Witch Burn, or Night of the Eagle.
So that one is another college professor, and it's set in the academic world at this college, and he seems to be
in what in America, right? In New England or something?
No, I
California?
think that one's in England. That one's set
it
in
is
England as well. I think.
Yeah, I think it's like an it felt like an Oxford-y type.
American, but yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And that one, he seems to have a blessed life. All the kids like his classes. He's new to the school, but it seems like he's in line to get the chair position of the department. He's got a great wife, all these things, and
Sally Homemaker, who has something of a secret of her own.
Right. It turns out he's teaching a class at the beginning of the film, and he says the way to dispel these superstitions is I do not believe. Because these things aren't real. They don't have any power. They only have power in your mind if you let them have power. When he gets home, he finds out that his wife believes, and she has an inordinate amount of talismans and protection charms.
A significant collection, yes. Indeed.
A veritable cornucopia.
A cornucopia.
Yeah. He makes him destroy all of these because it goes in the face of everything he believes, everything he's and from that moment on, his life seems to just start spiraling downward. And we won't get into it any more than that, really.
No, but I'll just say one thing without totally spoiling it. There's a moment where he's given two very clear choices. One, do a very pragmatic thing that makes a lot of sense and that he should probably do for her welfare. And the other is to just do whatever the hell it is she's saying to do. And that fork in the road is like a really fantastic moment in the film, I think. And I don't know, it's just my favorite bit. I really, really love that. Like there's something more to it, just like, okay, I believe in the ruins now, or I believe in the curse now. It's that you're asking me to do something and I'm just going to trust you and do it, even if I don't know what's going on. Like I really believed in those two characters in that moment, which was wonderful for me. And the other thing I would say about Burn Witch Burn is the part of the curse on him going after his position is this awful, very modern professor student sex scandal.
Yes.
That actress,
which I feel like
was amazing.
Back in '62 had to have been super risque. Even if it's done in a very PG way, it still was,
I agree,
out there and tricky.
My favorite element of both these films is I kept thinking of, like, this 57, 62, that era. This was like the height of like scientific thought. We were, space race and launching satellites and all these scientific breakthroughs were happening. And I love that the reaction from some filmmakers were, let's challenge these things. It's a great fodder for these suspenseful thriller horror films. Right. Is that we can challenge the scientific thought and say, well, no, we need to we need to remember sort of the things that everybody believed in. We'll get, and there's an element of that coming up in another film too, of this, the beliefs of the before and now science is coming in. And that's, I kept thinking of that as I was watching both these films, and just they're delightful.
Yeah. There's I like both films. My favorite is Curse of the Demon. I think the direction by Jacques Tourneur is just outstanding in it. He's clearly drawing on his experiences. He kind of got his big break working for Val Lewton, the producer, who produced 9 films in the 40s, where basically RKO gave him a...
Val Lewton directed one of my favorite monster movies, The Abominable Snowman, and Day the Earth Caught Fire too, right? So at the same time. No, that's Val Guest.
Different guy.
That's a different Val from England.
Yeah.
Val
But
Lewton.
this guy, so RKO would give him a title like "I Walked with a Zombie." Go make that movie. Here's $10.
Yeah.
And so he just had to create these things, and he's a producer that all 9 of those films feel like they're made by the same person does, because it's his influence.
It was a big producer's era back then, more than I think it is now,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. So the 3 he did for Luton are Cat People, I Walked with a Zombie, and The Leopard Man. And they're all fantastic. But Turner also did a great film noir called Out of the Past with Robert Mitchum and Kirk Douglas. If you guys haven't seen it, that's a great film. But what he's doing in Night of the Demon is, and what he meant to do more so than is seen in the film, because he left back to America, I think, after shooting was done and didn't do the final editing. And the producer, who everybody hates apparently, put more of the demon in. He wanted to just suggest the demon. He says he never even wanted to show the demon, but I don't think that's really accurate, because he had the production designer design the demon. So I think he intended to show glimpses of it or whatever. But he wanted to suggest it, which was what Val Lewton's films all did. They just suggested things, and they just had this atmosphere and dread that came from nothing because they had no budget for anything. And he's really relying heavily on those tricks, I think. And I think he does a great job.
Night of the Demon was clearly made in England, because it feels it's a lot of location shooting, and it feels very English. Burn Witch Burn feels very studio backlotty by comparison, but it's still very atmospheric and fun.
Right. And
I think it's better that they actually show what they show. I found it really fascinating and actually kind of terrifying. I have this old horror book I've had for 30 years, and there's an actual picture of that creature in the Night of the Demon portion, and I've always wondered what the hell it was. So it's kind of fun to find and be like, oh, now I know after all these years. I really thoroughly enjoyed both of them, actually.
There's a way to read both of these films. They both have this moment or moments where you see something that if that's real, obviously the supernatural exists. Night of the Eagle kind of gives you the clue on that part of it for Burn Witch Burn, that title, if you're following me. And the demon is for Night of the Demon. But there's also a way to read each of these movies. Now, that's not necessarily how I read them, but there is a way to read each of these movies as it's all in their head. There isn't anything supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I really like about these films, too, is both of them have that. It's like, is that the power of suggestion, hypnotism, or whatever?
Yeah, that's exactly what Carswell said to Dana Andrews' character. Dana Andrews is like, yeah, they told me 3 days ago so that I have 3 days to think about this and let it sink in and really make me believe. It's all part of that's the process of how they're going to make it work.
Right.
Well, and Andrews' character doesn't, if I'm remembering it right, correct me if I'm wrong at the end, but he never experiences the demon either.
Right.
We experience it from 2 different perspectives. That really lends credence to the idea that the thing is real to us, the audience, but to our hero, who is with the film's largely from his perspective and a little bit from our heroine as well. She brings different perspectives, but he never, he does some clever things to fight and to manipulate the curse itself, but he never really experiences that creature, which gives you that out where if you're somebody who wants to enjoy it as being all in your head, you kind of can do that, which is
my favorite moment. I mean, I laughed out loud at how brilliant it was then when they're on the train at the end and is like, oh, here's your book. Oh, no, that was here when I got here. I mean, I was laughing so hard. It was so well done.
It was
that's not mine.
So great. No, yeah.
What about your bag? What about your coat?
There's even a moment where Niall McGinnis is like, he's like, oh, he's like, oh, and so they know there's this game, and it's so good.
So I was laughing out loud. I'm like, that's just so well done and hysterically funny. Considering what comes right after is rough, but. Yeah,
I think my 2 favorite sort of set pieces in the film are when he goes and meets Carswell at his estate, and they're putting on fair
The-
for the children.
the little
Children.
clown
Children's
show,
magic show.
Yeah,
Boy,
and
that's
the
creepy and weird.
I love
his
children.
demonstration of his power or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
really effective, I think. Just with
Yes.
some wind.
Yeah.
Children are very innocent or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah.
Creepy.
My
Creepy.
favorite real quick is we get the we have a moment with the demon, and the demon is very ominous and very slow.
So cool.
And then there's a moment where the demon has picked up a person, and then all of a sudden it's like and it goes so fast. It was really jarring, and I was like, oh my god, I did not think that was going to be so.
I was genuinely weirded out by that person's last appearance. I'm like, this is really creepy. Like, it was surprisingly frightening.
My favorite was definitely Dana Andrews fighting the stuffed cheetah and the
the stuffed cheetah. Oh my god, that was so great.
But I love
the walk
the mother,
afterwards.
the actress that played the mother.
The walk afterwards actually is really cool. But no, the
that's
mother
really
and who's the woman in it? She's great in it, actually.
Peggy
good.
Peggy Cummings is the his colleague's niece or whatever, who becomes his sort of love interest. And
There was
Jean Sailor is Carswell's mother, who's just.
There was a line in there. I thought the dialogue was really smart. The Missouri line was brilliant. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Missouri line.
Where I can't remember
that.
exactly what it is. It's like, people in the scientific community generally come from Missouri, the show me
state.
It was really well done. And if you blinked, you missed it.
I didn't catch that.
Hysterically funny.
Hey, Michael. When I was a kid and I went to the trial of the guy who shot Bill Hickok or whatever, I know you're intimately familiar with this.
Yeah.
There was this chick in there, the Show Me State lady. She was from Missouri.
Calamity Jane?
No, it was just one of us, one of the tourists, and she got put on the jury or whatever, and she just kept saying, "I'm from Missouri. Show me." She just injecting herself into the next play.
Show me.
So
Show me.
I did notice that in Night of the Demon, but I'm hypersensitive to it because of this obnoxious Missouri tourist lady from my trip to the Black Hills.
That was a really smart bit of dialogue. Very, and again, blink and you miss it. And that's what I liked about it.
Right. He didn't do it. He didn't. I'm from Missouri. The Show Me State. It was very. It was downplayed it.
Yeah.
Which was really.
So I thought some of the dialogue was really smart. Even the. All the scientific garbledygook was, I'm like, I'm buying it. I think it was, everything was sold very well.
The screenplay's by Charles Bennett, he worked with Hitchcock a lot in his British period. So he wrote the 39 Steps and Too Much and things like that. So he's a pretty good writer.
For a really hokey spook fest story, it's very smart and subtle script. Very fun.
Yeah,
both of these films are adaptations of some sort of very well regarded literary sources. Night of the Demons from Casting the Runes by M.R. James, who's written tons of ghost stories. They have a tradition over in Britain where it's a ghost story for Christmas or whatever. They're usually whatever episode or something they're showing during that time, it's usually based on one of his stories. And Burn Witch Burn is from Conjure Wife by Fritz Lieber Jr., which it actually won a Retro Hugo Award in 2019 for Best Novel. So
nice.
They both have good source materials.
Real quick, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that I've never seen Peter Weingart in anything but Flash Gordon. And
You've never even seen The Innocents?
No, and I had no idea he was so hot. I'm like, all I'm thinking about yesterday is Clitus, I'm bored. Show me something, your hairy chest. Maybe that, but it's like I was really surprised. But he was really good too. I thought it was a fantastic performance. Yeah. And Janet Blair, is that her name? She was great.
Janet Blair.
There's something about her.
Pansy,
Yeah.
Well, are you guys familiar with the Romero film Season of the Witch?
Yeah,
this seems very clearly inspired by this. I don't know if you've seen it in a while, but I was thinking
it's been a long while, but it does.
It feels like this was definitely an inspiration for that. I mean, I'm assuming so.
Especially with the idea that these aren't women out in the forest, you know,
they're bored
stirring a
housewives.
cauldron. They're
Yeah.
you know, everywhere, and
Mhm.
you know, even at the most pleasant dinner party, there might be a witch there. That was the two things very much share at least that much in common, which I think is
When the
very
ending felt
what
like
do you guys
the end of
think of-
Mildred Pierce, like that whole cliffside thing. I'm like, oh, we're out here with Mildred Pierce. Joan Crawford's going to walk in.
What do you guys think of Margaret Johnson as Flora Carr? She sort of ends up being the villain of Burn Witch Burn.
It's okay.
Is
A
it
little
that
over the top, but I liked her.
A little vampy, but that's kind of what you have to do. And,
or something. She's got this bird-like quality.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, the chase through the hallway with that, I'm like, what? I mean, we're literally like, what is going on? It was really well done.
Good.
That was well done, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about two movies with just really, you know, kind of with special effects that are, you know, that are like the reverse smoke thing in Curse of the Demon, and
it's really one of the best reverse smoke effects I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's saying
because
a lot.
it's like bats
and
that
using
started, it's really weird. It's like
and using
sparkles.
and being able to use that eagle in like clearly like some models, but keeping it dark enough where you could mat it over and splice the two together. It's just really good stuff.
Well,
we got to move on to the next two movies.
Well, one more quick thing. I thought it was quite funny, the fact that, I mean, the foreshadowing of the statue, I'm like, I get it, but I bought into it. I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying this, but I'm like, I get it. We know something's going to happen here. You know? But it was great.
I got just a couple more things I want to say how these tied together for me. One, and there's two things I noticed on this last screening. I watched them as a double feature with George, showed him these films. The conductor of the music for both films, not the composer, is the same.
Conductor.
Matheson. And Reginald Beckworth, who plays the medium in Curse of the Demon when they go see the seance. He's also one of the teachers at In Witch Burn.
We noticed that too.
Reginald Beckworth.
Yeah. That was
that's awesome. So as a double feature, I think we give these 2 thumbs up.
I really like them, and thank you for
that
introducing them,
seance
Rob.
scene,
I
man,
totally
was
enjoyed them.
super funny because it was one of those where it kind of has to be real, and yet even as an audience member, you're like, shut up with your stupid seance.
But his reaction, Dana Andrews' reaction was hysterical.
It was awesome. I mean, that's you as an audience member, you get the authenticity of some of what you're hearing, but the fact that he doesn't, and you sort of love him for just being like seance. Yeah,
now, did I catch this? That
I enjoyed that
the female lead's license plate was something 666. Did I catch that right?
Yeah.
Boo.
That's right.
I had a license plate that was 665 once. The neighbor of the beast.
One other thing,
beast adjacent.
In terms of double features, is Burn Witch Burn is co-written by Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont. Right. Richard Matheson wrote Bid Time for Farewell, the novel.
Wrote everything.
Somewhere in Time. So
literally,
our first double feature.
Richard Matheson wrote all of it, everything.
All of the things. All right, so now we're gonna jump forward a decade or two here. And we're going to move into a couple of Michael films, and we're going to it is the again more of the like the horror of the suggested, the horror of being vulnerable. I just meant that we were moving to Michael's films. I didn't mean to make it sound like
it came out.
I apologize. I apologize.
It sounded like, there are films, and then there's Michael films.
Right.
I apologize. That was not my intent. I just meant to move us to the films that you chose, the films that you forced us to watch against our will. So we are going to move on to we have Black Christmas and When a Stranger Calls.
Yeah. Black Christmas I saw in college, like very post heyday of horror. And I was 100% horrified and actually screamed out loud, which that doesn't happen that often. But I think Black Christmas, even though you can consider it a Christmas film as well, it's Bob Clark, who went on to do, of course, the Porky's franchise and A Christmas Story.
Just the one.
No, he did all three of them.
He directed all of those?
I believe so. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I almost
at least he produced them. I'm assuming he was on board for all three of them in some capacity.
I suspect
and of course, A Christmas Story. But it's
And Murder by
Black
Decree.
Christmas, both
and Murder by
films-
Decree, and a whole bunch of other cool things. Bob Clark's a good director.
Yeah, he is.
It's why I hate to saddle him with the Porky sequels,
Well, I don't know for sure. Maybe I'm wrong,
unless
but
he
I-
really is
I paid a
responsible.
mortgage.
You know,
I don't know. Joel's the research person. He can know. But the good thing about Black Christmas is that it's, both films, and the reason why it's a double feature, I'll just dive into that right away, is because it takes the urban legend of the babysitter receiving calls. I won't say any more because that kind of spoils things. But Black Christmas is what I've always considered an immense exercise in just knife cutting tension. Like, it's so slow in its burn, but it builds everything, and it comes to just such a crazy.
came out the same year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right?
Yeah.
And those two films really, and Black Christmas, Texas Chainsaw Massacre certainly, because of the sexy title, but these two movies form the basis, for good or ill, mostly ill, but when for good, for really good, the sort of what horror movies were about to become for the rest of that decade, and for at least the first half of the 80s decade. So the next 10 years, really. And the one really neat thing that they share, and I'll let you continue, Mike, I know you're just into your intro, but the one really cool thing that they share is they're both horrifically violent, but they're largely bloodless exercises. There aren't gore effects on display in them really at all, which both of them to some degree, because like I say, the violence is rather profound in each film. Yeah. Both are sort of remembered for being these horrible, gory, Black Christmas is often called the first slasher movie. It is to a large degree, but it's Clark's he comes from a different school, and he's sort of classy, and he wanted to make a more Hitchcockian thing. And by holding back what he shows on screen, he makes it 2-3 times, I think, as impactful, the violence. And I think that's a lesson that we.
Well, I mean, everyone talked about Halloween being the seminal film. It's like, not really. I mean, it is Black Christmas. It is Psycho to an extent, and it is Texas Chainsaw, because everything else started to come after that, like you said, really hot and heavy. So, but I agree. Black Christmas it's not what you necessarily see. It's what you don't see, because you really, without spoiling, you don't really ever see anything.
Right.
And I think that's, I read something years ago that I always thought was interesting, is the benefit of the non-revelation in Black Christmas is what makes it work, whereas it does work in like Halloween. You get that explanation, in Halloween, it works on that level, but I don't think it would work in Black Christmas if we knew everything. I think it's better off not having any idea.
I agree. It feels like a whodunit. It feels like that. And although I don't know who it would be. The big red herring in it, Keir Dalia's character, clearly is not the killer, because you would just never spend that much time trying to make you feel like he might be if he was. The
interesting thing, and I don't want to spoil, but there's always something I've questioned in the end of the film. I won't say it, but it's something about his character and an action that he takes, which doesn't make sense unless he knows something he doesn't supposed to know. Does that make sense? I don't want to be too vague, but so
the whole ending is a head scratcher. Not really. I think all the evidence you need is there. There's I don't want to call it a plot hole, because that's not what it is, but there's you relying on a real massive sort of incompetent act of stupidity to get to the end of the movie. But we're given plenty of evidence that certainly could be true too. So the ending of Bob Clark's Black Christmas is great. It kind of makes the movie. There is not this moment where, without spoiling it by telling you what doesn't happen, but there just isn't this moment where the cop saves the day, or there's no moment of revelation. The survivors aren't helpful in filling in any of the blanks.
Right.
Like the usual things that you get at the end of the film of this, it's absent all of that stuff. And that makes it stick with you for a bit longer, I think, than it would have otherwise.
Agreed. And I think one of the benefits of Black Christmas too is that it has such great sense of humor. I mean, Mrs. Mack, you know, the house mother, I mean, she's great. It's a great over the top body performance. She's so much fun. And it has all that wonderful extra stuff. I think the performances are really solid. I mean, Margot Kidder, Olivia Hussey, Andrea Martin's amazing.
Andrea
John
Martin.
Saxon. I mean, the cast is just one after the other. Solid.
Yeah, the guy who plays the dumbass deputy.
Yeah.
The Pam, what's her face, the Canadian actress from Strange Brew, who plays the first victim, I guess we'll call her.
Yeah.
They're all really, really good. And even when they're not good, there's something where the camera loves them anyway, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I think Clark knows how to juggle them. And I think he did that in the edit too, in a really smart way, so that what you end up with is really, really good.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the other things that I've always found interesting is kind of the abortion subplot.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting because it's where it is in time, but it's also makes for one of the most frightening moments in the entire film.
Yeah.
I mean, when that is brought up again, it's like a bomb dropped. I remember when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my God.
I saw an interview with Olivia where she was actually, it was not an interview, it was at a fan event, which she tends to avoid, but she went to one eventually. And they just asked her about that. That was really forward thinking and all this. And she just was, Olivia, if you know her, she's this very classy lady, English lady. And she just kind of like, and in this, she's just this kid really. And she just like, they just needed something to talk about in between all the killings. So she was given this moment. I just thought that was really funny. She was given this moment to bring some profundity to her discussion of this film, which you would think Olivia, of all people, would be wanting to do. And instead she's like, no, just killings. And then that was just some stuff they threw
killings
in there.
And we thought an abortion would be fun.
Yeah.
But it's not there by accident. And it's not something that is just mentioned. Like, it's a thing that's going on that
it plays a huge part. Yeah. And it plays a huge part in what the characters believe is the end of this saga.
Well, I think just to transition to the second part of the double feature is that in this, I think the strength and what I think is amazing about Black Christmas is that the audience knows the entire time.
Yeah,
we know, but it's the fact that even when the revelation comes, it's still, and that's a testament to the filmmakers and to Hussey's performance, because we already know this. But the fact that when the news is delivered, it's still another bomb. Like
that, we go through it with her when she goes through it, even though we already know it. That is the film's masterstroke. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and so I mean, going into When a Stranger Calls, I mean, we don't have that same insight, and I think that it works so beautifully in that film, which is 76 or 79. I can never remember.
79.
But you know that it was a short film. I guess it was Fred Walton's, I guess, like final film product or project for a class is, I guess, the first like 20 minutes of the film. And then he expanded it into a feature, which I'm like, I can't imagine he didn't get an A, you know, on that first 20 minutes.
As a short film, When a Stranger Calls, perfect.
Well, this is
as a feature film, it lacks a lot as it goes.
This is what is interesting. Shut up, Joel. Is what I found the last time, because I watched a double feature of When a Stranger Calls and When a Stranger Calls Back, which I had never seen. This was a few months ago, so I was so happy to revisit it. But I think what really works for that film, other than the opening and closing, which are very similar as far as just tension and insanity, the finding out the character is unheard of in a film like this. You know, to get to know who this guy is, I think that's a stroke of genius.
Yeah, Rob said there's something similar, that he really liked that. I guess I feel like we don't get to know him. I feel like he's a bit of a cartoon psycho.
See, I don't think so. I think there's so much drama and pain, and and to see him kind of have those flashbacks of what he had done, which is more horrifying than anything else in the film.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with you.
But I think that's what's
and
so
I like
unique.
I like the obsessed cop. Like I like the elements of that. I didn't think it was bad. I just it does feel like it's patched together. It feels like it's a beginning and an ending, and then you got this whole middle act that's not, where we're not with the same central character that we start and end with, which is weird.
It is weird, but it works for me. I agree. It's like I want to follow someone from the beginning to the end, but
well,
it is such a
do
weird
something different.
detour.
I'm cool with that too. You don't always have to obey the rules, but it is a big departure from what the rules are. We can at least agree on that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is the first 20 minutes, because I read about this as a kid and none of my video stores growing up had this film. So reading about this for years and years and years and years, I finally got it, I think at Premiere Video in Fargo.
Yeah.
That's where I finally found a copy of this. And I believe we had a movie night and a bunch of people were over for it. And those first 20 minutes delivered so hardcore.
Sure.
Like that even perhaps, weaknesses of the rest of the film, which I don't think that's terrible weakness.
No.
Is the
I didn't mean to imply that it was.
No, but it is a weird
it's such a
detour.
humdinger of an opening that
it is. It's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes of pure like scary perfection. It's so good.
I have to tell you about that first 20 minutes. For many years, I thought that was the entire film. I saw it in my dining room on a little TV. It was dark out, watching it, and I think I was so freaked out that I had to turn it off. But I thought that was the end of the movie. And 20 minutes felt like I had so much tension and horror and everything that it felt like the whole movie. And I don't know if I ever babysat again after that.
Oh my God.
Even into adulthood, when the phone rings and you get like there's nobody there, or if you get a crank call or something, if it's night out, it freaks me out.
I mean, the thing that it's talking about things that you don't really see. There's one of the calls that I think it's later in the beginning where she asks him, "Can you see me?" Mm-hmm. And you'll notice that the top of the staircase is not in frame.
Yep.
Which means he's standing there looking at her. And when you start to puzzle piece those things together, it is terrifying to know that he's right there. He's looking at her. I know that's sort of spoilerish, but I mean, if you know the old babysitter phone call,
I don't think you can can really spoil the opening
that's a
act
common thing.
When a stranger calls. It's been spoiled by dozens of other movies at this point.
Well,
honestly.
and that's what I was going to say, going with what you said, Rob. I mean, for years, I thought that the only exposure that I had to it was, I should say the first exposure I had to it was there's like a sort of a documentary clip movie that Donald Pleasance hosts and
Terror in the Aisles.
Thank you, Terror in the Aisles, all about horror movies and all stuff. And that was like, of course, they showed. I think that movie even starts out pretty much the whole thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a creepy. That looks like a creepy movie. And I bet that's. And I had no idea that was just the first 20 minutes of a longer piece.
Yeah.
Until movie night over at Michael's dorm one night.
Yeah, but it's a great piece too. I mean, Colleen Dewhurst is fantastic. Durning's great as always. Although, how does he throw that door completely off its hinges in the chase?
That's
but
ridiculous.
Whatever.
Colleen's working really
rush.
hard. I agree with you. She's put in a tough spot by a screenplay that.
Well, she's a weird.
Well, she's weird, but I don't mind that so much. It's they put her in this situation that as time goes on, the attrition in her character being able to be reasonable becomes intolerable to me, and she just sort of stays calm and reasonable the entire time.
Yeah.
With this dude even shows up in her house. And I think there's some magic in our killer too. I don't think he's a particularly good actor, honestly.
I disagree.
Me too.
I thought he's what sells the middle of the film.
Guys, he's never been in anything of any significance but this.
He died right after this film was shot.
Because he's an alcoholic and because he was super insecure and scared. They had to keep talking him off the ledge to get him out in front of the camera when he was making this thing because he thought he sucked so bad. I feel like there's a lot of magic in that. Like there's a lot of this weird guy being weird in front of the camera that isn't technique, that is really just something that this director was his friend, so he was able to keep him going. He was able to cast him even though the studio didn't want him. There's also, do we see a picture of this guy and then there's some other guy halfway through the movie? Why does that happen? Who's the person that we show standing at the door or whatever in the still photographs at the end of the beginning of the short film?
Well, that's Charles Durning.
Well, he opens the door and Durning is.
When she opens the door, it's him.
Oh, and the snap zoom on that's Charles Durning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like some other person altogether.
I don't think it's a perfect
cool.
film, but
that makes it make sense.
I think that the actor, I think the fact that he goes to Dewhurst and he just really wants to be her friend. It's very sad.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that he sells it completely and he's just so desperate and down on his luck. I disagree, Ryan. I think it's
poor
a really
child murderer guy. He just wants a friend.
Well, no, but that's what's so interesting
child murderers
about it.
do.
Because what are we ever going to see that? I mean, we never seen that in a film like this.
I'm following you, impressive. But at the same time, I know this guy's killed these kids for some weird reason. So I'm not sympathetic to him. I'm sorry. I enjoy watching him get beat up by a bunch of rednecks. I wish they'd have killed him. That's where I'm coming to the movie from. And I think it's a legit place.
Sympathizing with what he did. It's a matter of that there's an opportunity that they're trying to make him sympathetic by showing him.
Well, it's more interesting watching a guy who's his own hero. That part I totally agree with, and who really is earnestly trying to connect with somebody. Well, you know, like Dollarhide in Manhunter or Red Dragon, whichever one you're watching. There's this weird moment where this guy who's this monster like has this chance at happiness with this other person, and as an audience member, you're like, the story does sort of make you invest in the relationship somewhat. But I felt like Dewhurst, you know, she's very kind to him, but I think she's humoring him. I don't think there's any real connection there.
No, I don't know. I don't agree. There's no connection. She's being nice to him because she's being nice, whatever. But the fact that or because she's scared and that's the best but I mean, he clearly just wants a friend. I don't think he would have hurt her. That's what I think is interesting. Maybe he's just child.
I can't agree with you there. Eventually he would have killed her.
When I think of these two,
he would have. I mean, if that would have continued, eventually he certainly would have killed her. No question. In his own mind, he would have, just because he's a killer. He's a psycho. I don't feel for him. I'm glad he's dead. Spoiler alert for When a Stranger Calls.
Yeah.
But I do love the weird, twitchy guy. Like, I love that actor in that part, which is the point I was getting to, even though I don't think he's a particularly great actor, from like a making choices or making sense sort of way. I feel like that's what's amazing about it. There isn't any conventional games going on with him. And it's cross-cut constantly with Durning, who's this old pro playing this very clear through line, you know, and then you get this weird random psychoness, whether he's being sweet or whether he's murdering somebody. It's weird and crazy and you don't get it. And I find that is very compelling. But I don't think.
And I think that's what sets this film aside, apart from everything else. I mean, it is such a weird center portion of the film, but I think that's what's interesting.
Because both of these films, Michael, I'm directing this at you since you chose these. Do you, because those are both sort of that babysitter folktale trope. I don't mean trope in a negative connotation. I just mean, you know, that sort of structure. Do you have one that you like better?
Oh, Black Christmas, hands down.
Okay,
there's no question.
It's a better made movie for sure.
It's a better made movie and it's more terrifying.
And yet When a Stranger Calls, because of that first 20 minutes, is probably the more well-known, more famous.
Yeah, but Black Christmas has been remade twice.
Among horror fans, Black Christmas really is a pinnacle film. In a way, I think it not quite with the general public.
Sure.
Both films have been remade. Black Christmas been remade twice.
Yep. And yet I only mention that, you know, saying it's more famous because I mean, Scream, the whole opening of Scream is, you know, is more When a Stranger Calls than it is Black Christmas.
Yeah.
And which is where a lot of a newer generation of people were exposed to that story, that babysitter idea.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Rob, I think I interrupted you and you were about to say something.
Well, when I thought of these films before I rewatched them, and I think what most people who maybe aren't super familiar with them, you hear the titles, and if you're familiar with them at all, you probably think, oh, those are both slasher movies. Well, Black Christmas is sort of a prototype of that, but there's no gore,
right?
That sort
but
of thing.
you have to say it's a slasher.
The
movie.
final
Yes,
girl.
it definitely
Yeah.
there's a legacy that comes from that evolves into a full slasher movie. This is missing
When a
that
Stranger
gore
Calls
and
isn't a
the
slasher movie at all.
awesomeness of the grossness or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come to When a Stranger Calls, it's not a slasher movie at all. It's a thriller, more like it's interesting that you mentioned like Manhunter, because what I had in my notes when I was watching it was Silence of the Lambs. You know, like you've got this villain who, for me, was really interesting. Hannibal Lecter's really interesting in Silence of the Lambs. I mean, that's a fascinating character, but he's a horrible person. He does horrible things, but he's a fascinating character.
Yeah, but this
similar.
weird little guy
Silence of
is
the
not
Lambs
Hannibal
quality.
Lecter. That comparison's not close. Maybe he's got a little Buffalo Bill in him, but even there, it's not much.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not comparing. I'm just saying in terms of there's this interesting.
If you super like serial killers and you want to spend time with a particularly cuddly one, this is definitely the movie for you. I'd agree with that.
Oh my god.
All right. Well,
I'm not saying that's an outlier in our society. There are people out there who's super into serial killers. If you haven't seen When a Stranger Calls, you're missing one of the best ones where you really get to where it's really the killer's movie, and you should check it out because that's for sure. He's really, really interesting. A super interesting screen presence and interesting character. No doubt.
The other thing I want to say about these movies is just for me, it's always fascinating how one thing evolves into another. And I like seeing John Saxon in Black Christmas because he was in Mario Bava's The Girl Who Knew Too Much in 1963, which is sort of credited as being the first Giallo film, the Italian film style that it really evolved into what became the slasher films in North America.
Kind of.
And
North
so
Americans
sort of
are typically not capable of Giallo because they don't have the artistic pretensions. So I don't think there's much of a connection there.
Yeah.
But except novelty deaths. I mean, that's what ties it all.
That's what ties
all these films together.
Killer, you don't know who it is.
Yeah, but Giallo really like non sequiturs, not even knowing what's happening. What does this even have to do with this plot? Like it really is about these weird set pieces more than it's about some sort of story or whatever.
With the Giallos?
Yeah. Well, with Argento,
there's a mystery. It makes no sense usually. There's always like a whodunit, a mystery.
Right.
There's some unknown.
But it's that willingness to embrace the absurdity, and we don't do that as Americans, I don't think. But that's another discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think speaking of Giallo, I think we should say Giallo to Ryan's films now. That's my segue of the day.
No complaints from me, man. You earned your money for this episode.
All right. No, we're gonna move on. We're gonna we have 1981 and 1983. So these great sort of coming out of the 70s into the 80s. Technology is on the rise. And Ryan's films. The first one is Wolfen, and the second one is The Hunger.
Well, remember, I'm a host of a movie podcast where we've done 12 to 15 sort of scary movie episodes. So I had to find two movies we hadn't talked about on the show yet. I know not everyone here has listened to every episode, but that was a challenge. And then I was able to come up with three. Wolfen, The Hunger, and I wanted to do Wolfen and The Lady in White, but when I thought of The Hunger, I'm like, that's that fits Wolfen. Like that's a really good double feature, actually. So I went with that one, even though I don't like it as much. And then it turns out, and this was an afterthought, but it turns out they're both based on novels by Whitley Strieber.
I thought that was why you chose them.
Well, no, I mean, that is kind of why I chose them. They go together really well, and that's clearly, it's not a coincidence that they're written by the same guy.
Yeah, the technology.
But no,
aspect.
I didn't choose them for that reason. That was a happy accident. I just didn't know that. They're the two novels, the two good novels that Whitley Strieber wrote before he got abducted by aliens. And we won't go too much into his life or lack thereof at this point, but he was a really promising horror novelist who wrote really substantive things. Wolfen, although it's abbreviated somewhat, apparently Michael Wadley, who's the only other thing he's ever done is Woodstock related stuff. He shot the Woodstock concert film, and this was his first feature. It turned out to be his only feature.
That's a bummer.
And it's a bummer because he brings a lot to the party, right?
Yeah.
From a stylistic standpoint, from a integrity in storytelling standpoint, it's full of that. And it's thematically rich, I think, thanks to Whitley, and Wadley embraces that instead of, skirting over it, which I'm grateful for. But he just wasn't a bit of it. He was like a lot of first-time directors who'd had success at something. He was a bit of an egomaniac. His first cut of the thing was 3.5 hours. He was fighting the studio on every little decision. So was that, and he eventually had final cut taken away from him. One of the really neat things he did was he insisted on Albert Finney being the lead in this. It's hard, you got to go back in time to 1980, but every guy in Hollywood wanted this role for some reason. It was a very popular and accomplished book that was being turned into a movie by this baby boomer hero guy who made the Woodstock film. And they all want to do it. Most famously, Dustin Hoffman fought until the end with the studio's backing to star in it.
Wow.
And Albert Finney, no slouch. He wasn't quite Dustin Hoffman in 1981, but he's not a slouch. He's an Oscar-winning actor. He was Michael Wadley's favorite actor. And so Wadley insisted on him. This is another thing where he got his way, but the studio, that it's all this tension between Warner Brothers and him, or Orion. I can't remember.
Orion.
Yeah. Fighting over just trying to make this film somewhat commercial. That's the behind the scenes stuff, which there's tons of it, which I'm very interested in. But in front of the camera, it's just kind of an amazing, dreamlike. It's very violent, but it's very weird. And the thing that's most powerful about it, in my opinion, is it captures this it captures this part of Manhattan, this grungy, ugly side of New York that just, you can't find it there anymore. With real estate values being what they are, that it captures this pre-gentrification Manhattan that isn't really on film much of anywhere except in this. With these amazing widescreen images of these neighborhoods that are just burned out husks of places. And that there's this magical something wild and something from the old world, something from America before Europeans were here that's going on here. It's just very compelling to me. And Wolfen, I really quite like a lot.
Well, this was my first time. I think I saw little snippets of this one morning when I was a kid on early morning HBO, getting up for my paper route. And I'm like, what the hell is this? So I've never seen it. And out of all the films that we talked about, other than Black Christmas, which is one of my favorites, I loved Wolfen. I thought it was fantastic. I was super, super engaged. I loved the performances. I can't think of the female actress, the lead actress.
Diane Venora.
Wow, where is she and what has she done? Because she was amazing.
She's
in everything.
She does a ton of stuff. Yeah, she does a ton of stage. She was in stuff
FX. She's in Heat. She's in.
Oh, okay.
The Jackal. She's in all kinds of things.
Yeah. Okay, then I'm just not familiar.
Diane's an interesting actor. Diane's a lot. She's a different kind of person. She brings the ugly. She's incredible. We talked about her in Heat. She's incredible in Heat because as an actor, she understands that her character is a foil for Al Pacino's character. And she understands that she's only got a limited amount of screen time and she's got to hit the Thing really, really hard in that sense. And she just, you hate her in it. You hate her in it because he doesn't hate her, but he's constantly frustrated by her. She just feels like the small, petty person in this world of all this horrible, nightmarish stuff. And I used to hate Diane for that because I didn't get it. I used to dislike Susan Sarandon for similar reasons that we're going to talk about in our next movie, because I didn't get it. I didn't get that these actors were rather bravely getting in touch with the dark side of these people while still somewhat being able to advocate for them. And I really was confusing a set of characters with qualities of the actor themselves. And was a huge mistake on my part in both cases, honestly. She's great in this. She's much more of she's younger in this, you know what I mean? So she hasn't quite grown into that dragon lady actor that she becomes later, but she's fantastic. Gregory Hines is fantastic in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really enamored by this. And it was a great dialogue. It was very snappy, but never sounding too clever for its own good. It all felt organic, and it was with them. And I won't say much more other than I really, really loved it. But the sequence where they walk out with the cop into in Wall Street, that square or whatever, that blew my mind. Yeah. Like when it all started to go down, Elwood and I are like, oh my God. Like it was just so, and it was, and Edward James Olmos, I'm like, who knew he had a hot body? But hey, good for you.
Yeah, back in the day.
But it was,
and if you can get over the fact that he's playing a Native American, he's fantastic in it. Yeah. Well, him and the older actual Native American, like that was very much Ed, especially in those days, in the Blade Runner days. And he was a really cerebral and like crazy man when you hired him, but he always brought something sort of crazy and original to your project. So if you could tolerate all his little hobbies and all of his questions and all of his mountain of suggestions for how to make the movie better, you got something sort of special out of him. Him and that other actor had this sort of mentor, student thing like they do in the movie, but in this I'm going to learn all this stuff and we're really going to represent this stuff in a spiritual way. And I think that comes across in the film in a really cool way. And not to mention that if you're scared of heights,
I'm like, how in God's name did you get the rights to be shooting up there? I mean, how did you do it?
Was a different
because
era.
They're clearly up there.
Yeah, it was a different era. Yeah.
It was a different era.
Yeah. And
Finney's up there. I'm like, okay.
Your big Oscar-winning star is up there with the little safety harness, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah. The film
at
was
a time
scary.
At a moment where he unharnessed, he's not harnessed, and then he has to harness himself. Yeah. Okay.
But
that wasn't done with CGI.
No.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen this film since I saw it on cable, probably when it first aired on cable. Mm-hmm. But there are two things that stuck with me for all the years in between. Snakes coming up through the toilet, bite you on the ass. Since I heard that, I've always had a fear of that. And when he talks about when people get their head chopped off, it would stay alive for a little while. And those two things,
about 1 in 5. Yep.
I'd forgotten everything else of the film almost. Those two things have stuck with me since I was exposed to them and traumatized.
That follow through with the cop and the scene that I was just talking about. I'm like, oh, I love shit like that. Sorry, I love stuff like that. It's like you set this up way earlier and then suddenly it's paying off. It's so lovely.
And it was paid, and it was and again, like and we talk about this in movies, it paid off, and it was like it paid off and then it was done. It wasn't like, see what we did? See what we did? We paid, it was just there and done. And if you caught it, great. If you didn't, then you missed it. And it's and you're poorer for it because it's really great. I also loved Wolfen a lot. I loved the cool point of view stuff, almost, it was, it was really great. I loved that it's very famously used all the time now, but the first time most people noticed it was in the Predator films, where you get this filtered camera, infrared sort of predator vision. That's way back in Wolfen, some 6 years earlier.
they do that from the perspective of the wolves, we'll say. Well,
yeah,
you know, go ahead.
No,
well,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say it's really interesting that the Steadicam operators, I think, listed in the opening credits because it's so important,
right.
you know, for the film. I love that he was credited right in the opening credits. I'm like, there you go. That's because you're important. Yeah, you always are.
Yeah.
But that's as a particular thing for that film.
Well, Steadicam was still relatively new invention, so it was a special thing, and it was a whole unit on this movie that was responsible for a good deal of it, very important footage. So yeah, it is cool to see that. I agree.
What was the run time on this?
It's almost exactly 2 hours.
Okay, so it's about an hour from his first cut.
Yeah, although there's legends with that. First cuts are typically not paced properly. Assembly cuts, you can't say, oh, there really is a 3.5 hour movie here. There probably isn't.
Right.
But nevertheless, he delivered this thing, a first cut. I don't think we lost tons of scenes or content so much as they just
it might explain to me
they
why
just tightened the pacing on literally everything compared to what he was doing.
A note I had while I was watching it was, and one of the downfalls for me, if they're downfalls or whatever, is that it felt like sometimes we were going to places or checking things out that were never explained why we were going there, how we got there, why we're checking that out, why we're doing this now, why he's out here doing this. And I wonder if some of that's what was cut out.
It's
stuff.
Certainly possible, the reasoning behind that stuff. But I've always taken it as the film is an investigation. Our lead character is a cop, not a very special one, of a rather conventional one, in fact. And investigations do lead you down dead end paths and stuff. I mean, that is just sort of the nature of them. I feel like that's
what was missing is I like an investigation where like we get okay, let's check this, let's run down this lead. In this, we're just like, we showed up here. Why?
I didn't notice that, Rob. That didn't stand out to me as odd. Like, I guess I'm more of the idea of what Ryan said earlier. The whole thing felt like a dream. And I don't know if it was, because I was battling a cold, it was late at night, I think it all really, whatever, it all really clicked for me, and nothing stood out to me as less than or apparent as far as shortcomings. So I didn't see that. I understand what you're saying, but that didn't dawn on me. That didn't.
Well, I totally know what you're talking about too, because I've seen this a bunch of times, but again, even the scenes aren't about the scenes, even the scenes where they're investigating, they're looking for the answer to a specific question. But what you're getting is what's coming through are these weird relationships between these people, him and his partner, or whoever, them and the scientist, these bits of strange philosophy like this. That's the stuff that's the meat of the thing, as opposed to the wheres and why for us, which, if you super think about it, aren't that satisfying in a very conventional way. But that's why I sort of like that it's not a very conventional approach to get there either. I feel like it all sort of fits, at least in that way. But I do kind of know what you're talking about, and absolutely could be like the Batman versus Superman effect, where you just chop enough little bits out that it leaves questions lingering.
Right.
That maybe aren't important in the end, but it leaves them lingering in a way that can be a little bit off-putting. But I think the whole film is off-putting in a kind of magical way. So I'm down with that.
Well, I have a question for you guys in general, because I thought it was a really weird choice to have Gregory Hines get the first actual view. Did that seem weird to you?
A little.
I mean, why? It seems like that should have waited. Why did Hines get the first actual look? It was great. It was a great moment, but it felt really weird. Like, why does he get it?
That's a good point. That's interesting. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, there kind of is a reason, but I know what you're saying.
I guess it has something to do with potato chips.
The opening the beer was hysterically funny.
Yeah.
With the sound thing there. Yeah.
I also like, one of the great things that we have this point of view of the sort of, it's an infrared point of view of the, as we're just going to call them the wolves. And then, and that's
We'll call him the Wolfen.
The Wolfen, juxtaposed with this whole technology of this super security firm that uses this essentially the same technology as a lie detector test and other things. And I loved that.
I love the all the mirrors at the end, and I mean there's just some really amazing like stylistic choices that even what you're talking about, Joel, there's a reason for in the story. There's some things in this movie that are just gloriously visually wonderful for no reason, just for their own sake, and I find that delightful as well.
I think you could say that about our next about the second film in the double
even
feature
more,
too.
Even more style for its own sake than this one, for sure.
So, and that, of course, is as I mentioned earlier, The Hunger with Catherine Deneuve, David Bowie, and Susan Sarandon. I believe is how it's pronounced.
I think you're right. I give everybody French pronunciations for their names.
David Bowie. Oh, David Bowie. And,
this was fresh in my mind because when Charles de Lauzarico was on the show, he mentioned this in passing, basically, but it made me go, oh yeah, Warner Archive just put this out. I didn't like this movie a lot when I was a kid. What did we just say when we were off camera about There Will Be Blood? It impressed me more than I enjoyed it, which is still the case with Hunger. But still something about it, something stuck with me. So I was like, oh, I haven't seen that in forever. I should watch that. It's like in high def and widescreen. That'll be, I mean, even if I like it less the second time, it's going to look better and I'm going to get this sort of visual experience that I know I can count on. There's a great online review that I was telling Joel about the other day that some guy he's dismissing the movie, wholesale dismissing it, which I don't do, but he made a funny about it that I have to agree with, which he says it's like an hour and a half long Ultravox video. Which if you don't know who Ultravox is, they're an 80s band. It didn't quite make it big here, but they're a very super new romantic-y, spiky hair, artsy fartsy band, and their videos were very smoky and very slow motion-y and just people walking down long hallways and stuff. And that you get a lot of that in this, actually.
This was my first time seeing this. It's one of those ones I can't believe I haven't yet seen it. But all I knew going in was lesbian scene and curtains. That's all I knew from it.
Hey.
And
I believe that is the AKA
out of The Hunger. You had a good night at the movie.
I believe that's the AKA on this, much like Rob's were like, has the Night of the Eagle is AKA Burn Witch Burn. I believe The Hunger is AKA Lesbians and Curtains.
Yes.
Well, Catherine, say her name for me again, Joel, so I don't say it wrong.
Susan Sarandon?
No, that one I know.
Catherine Deneuve?
Catherine Deneuve plays an ancient Egyptian vampire living in New York in an upscale apartment. And this film's plot's not very important, but I feel like we need to give it that little bit of setup. She's had a variety of vampire companions throughout the years. Her latest is David Bowie. They seem very compatible. The scene opens up with a little, they pick a couple of unsuspecting chic, like cocaine snorting kids up at this club where Peter Murphy and Bauhaus is playing.
I thought it was Peter Murphy. How funny.
Yeah, Bela Lugosi's dead. I think that's Bauhaus's best song. The whole opening of the film is like a music video to that almost.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, I don't know how great it is, but you have to say it's very, very cool.
It's cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, they eviscerate these two people and they enjoy, wiping the blood off they're evil vampires. We've because of Twilight and just everything, Interview with the Vampire probably started there, but we've romanticized them to the point they tend to be our heroes and things when they show up and stuff. These guys, while the film takes them seriously as people, dare we say, they are, and who have weaknesses and frailties and insecurities and all that good stuff that makes for a good movie. The first thing we see them do is just this act of pure hunger and evil, and you can't forget it as you're watching the rest of the movie. And there's only one, to my mind, notable other sort of killing in the thing that is, because you've had this opening, this whole scene before anything even happens is just wrought with awful tension and pure horror. And I still think it's one of the most horrible murders I've ever seen in a movie. I remembered that from when I saw this as a kid, and I reacted to it even stronger now. Michael, that sort of goes along with your article, I think, a little bit. I'm just too sensitive for that thing now, even though I knew it was coming and I made my peace with it before I watched the movie again.
I mean, it's not
gross
graphic,
or explicit.
It's the idea of what's happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the idea is everything. The idea is everything. Yeah. It's the most powerful thing that you have. And this film, in a good way, in that scene, I think reminds us of that the idea is horrific. And Catherine's reaction to it is that it's evil. It's maybe lawful evil, but it's evil nonetheless. It's that, oh, now I have to deal with this kind of, there's, you know what I mean? She's
but their place is set up for it. So they got everything handled.
They got everything. They're good. And she probably won't go to jail for it. And she's got centuries of money stored up. So, there's no consequences for her. And she's disappointed. But to me, that it's that emotional distance that, we're used to these vampires as these passionate things, which they kind of are. But that emotional distance from us, the fact that we're their food, and even when we're not supposed to eat this kind of food or that kind of food, if we break down and do it, it's not a horrific, awful thing. It's this disappointing failure, like you just went off your diet or something. But I'm describing that wrong. But I found that horrible as well.
Well, no, I like the fact that they were distant. It just to me cemented how old she is. She's seen and done it all. There's nothing that's going to phase her at this point.
Right.
And I like that,
And Bowie's terrified, his breakdown, because he's her vampire companion. He's lived a long time, we're quite certain, but he's so good. He's coming to his end. He's disintegrating right before our eyes. And that performance, he's terrified of dying. This immortal monster who's terrified of dying. It's very...
Well, that's the sad thing. He won't. He's just going to run away.
Yeah, it's...
spoiler alert, but Jesus, I'm with you.
I was really enamored.
Yeah, the whole idea, and I love that little twist on the whole vampire mythos of you will have eternal life, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have eternal youth.
But you're not going to like it.
Yeah, and it's and I thought that, and then there's I loved Bowie in this film.
Her inability or unwillingness or both to quote release him is otherworldly, ununderstandable, and creepy and terrible, which I liked.
This was my first time, and it's been 2 days and it's still kind of lingering in my head. Right. Even after I watched all of these movies, kind of back to back to back, this is still kind of sitting there. And I don't really know why, because I don't think it's great, but it's just
I don't think so either, but
interesting
about it.
And visually over the top. I mean, it's like, I'm like, if I see one more curtain, I'm just going to break out laughing, but that's all it is. It's
plus
all...
Dan Hedaya, right, Joel?
Yeah.
Good old Dan Hedaya. I'm like, hey, Dan Hedaya, look at you. You're so young.
You're so skinny.
I think Sarandon's great. I think all performances, the three leads are really solid. They're
Sarandon's great. Cliff DeYoung too is really good. But Sarandon's really good. It's sort of her movie, and the movie introduces her kind of late and loses track of her even when she's on screen.
It's kind of two movies. That's the thing about it is it's this movie with Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie and
which I was surprised
Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon.
Anyway,
it was. I
have to point out the fact that Horner did the score, and there are exact replicas
for both of them.
Was it Wolfen that I'm thinking of that had actual
Horner
aliens?
did the score for Wolfen. I don't. The score for Hunger is Charles Delure, but it's almost entirely classical.
Oh, okay, because then it was Wolfen that I was thinking of. Like there are exact cues that we're using aliens. I mean, like exact. I don't know if
I've always said, and I'll just say it again, Aliens is a very celebrated score that has literally not one original note of music in it.
I'm like, wow, that's straight out of there.
Watch any of James's movies leading up to Aliens. You'll hear the entire score, everything. The only thing that he came up with that was new, and it's a humdinger, I'll get you, is that's it, which he steals from himself not 7 minutes later. It is nevertheless, that's it. All the rest of that is the Klingon music, the Wolfen music. I mean, the list goes on and on. They gave him like 3 days to do that score, and Gale Ann Hurd and James Cameron just yelling at him the whole time, and all he could do was just steal his own music and get the hell out, or steal classical music from other more famous science fiction movies that weren't his or theirs. Like he just stole the whole thing, and then got an Oscar nomination. So, who knows?
Well, I want to say, just as a side note, I'm really glad we did this, and I want to do these more often if we can. It's like all these movies that I've now experienced for the first time. I'm kind of happy.
Rob's mission statement, truly.
Yeah,
it was
I really like that I got to see all these things that I should have seen.
Last thing I want to say about The Hunger, and then we really have to get to Joel's films. And I try not to spoil it, but it's hard not to. The book has a really clear payoff. Our hero has a very clear choice. It's a fork in the road choice. Do you do this or do you do that? And she chooses something. She makes a choice that's obvious. In the film, it's not obvious what she's choosing. She puts an end to some stuff. There's definitely some catharsis at the end of the film, but she seems to have it both ways in a weird way that eliminates the choice from it. And Sarandon herself has said that depressed her in a way. She signed up for this story and she thought she knew what the story she was telling. She thought she understood the choice that her character was making. Right. She connected with all that, and they shot all of that, and then they sort of edited it out into this much more Anne Rice sort of ending. Now, Anne Rice isn't on the scene yet, but it really does have that kind of, well, you go through all this and then to end with, man, vampires are cool and sexy, huh? Seems like not the right place we're supposed to be in at the end of the movie. And I agree with Susan on that. So I'll just
real
say
quick,
that.
Rob, is there anything you
didn't really say anything, did you, boss? I'm sorry.
Well, the Hunger, there's a couple of things. One, I watched True Romance recently, and also directed by Tony Scott. And
right.
As soon as this movie started, boy, you can tell a Tony Scott movie when you see it. I don't know if it's the lenses he's using, the film stock he's using.
Editing, there's a lot in the editing, his style.
It's just, nails it. And two, I'm glad we did this because I think I understand the ending now. I didn't understand what was happening. I at the end, not the final end.
No, but I know what you're saying. It's disorienting.
I'm like, wait, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Why did it go there? It felt like a different movie to, hey, maybe we need up the gore or effects work or something. That kind of took me out of it a little bit.
Although it was Dick Smith that did the effects, the makeup effects.
They were good.
Well, they're great, and they're shot, and it no offense to the great makeup artists of our time, but you can be one of the best. If somebody shoots your stuff with a lot of front light and just, doesn't have creativity behind the camera, you end up looking stupid. And Tony really shoots the hell out of everything. I mean, that's the one thing we can definitely say about it.
When all else fails, add billowing curtains.
Indeed.
Terrence Malick certainly agrees.
All right, so you guys get to choose here. Do we want to go with, along with Wolfen, there are other wolves, like
Wolfen,
werewolves.
We didn't say it, but Wolfen was part of the 1981 werewolf trilogy of The Howling, American Werewolf in London, and Wolfen.
It's true. That's true.
Although it's sort of not, and it definitely stands out in that group as being something different, but that was called the Werewolf Revival, and your next film.
Or we could go with, who also gets hungry, and that's
Gary
werewolves.
Busey. Oh,
Gary, Gary
He does
Busey.
get hungry.
Oh, that's the best. Okay, so our
And so
next
Silver
film-
Bullet put the nail in the coffin of the werewolf cycle revival.
I guess the werewolf cycle ended just a few years later with my first movie. No, I went with there's a werewolf in our community double feature. And my movies were Silver Bullet from 1985 and the 2021's Werewolves Within. And I went with Werewolves Within because I hadn't seen it. It was new. I wanted to see it, and I knew it had a werewolf in it. So, but let's talk about Silver Bullet first.
All the boxes.
It checked Joel's requisite boxes. Yes, it did, because it also had actors that I really like, and I love Sam Richardson. I love Milena Ventrub. Anyway, Silver Bullet.
May they never work again.
How dare you?
I'm serious. That's their penance for Werewolves Within. But let's start with Silver Bullet.
Now, Silver Bullet, 1985, based on Stephen King, Cycle of the Werewolf. This is a movie that I watched a ton as a kid, and I hadn't seen it in a very long time. I was very curious to look at it through a modern lens, because it's a kid with a kid with a disability, which is obviously something that is very important to my life now. Children with disabilities, it's something that I wanted to, like, oh my God, I want to see this, to see how does this affect me now? Kind of goes with what your awesome article, Michael, that you wrote about, again, like what Ryan said, revisiting some of these things now as you're older through a different lens. Mm-hmm. And and Silver Bullet is the story of this small town where people are dying off, and of course there's a kid who thinks that it's werewolves, and the only one he can sort of get to even humor him, he convinces his sister. He gets his sister in on it, but the only adult that he can sort of even convinced to go along with this as a lark is old Uncle Gary Busey. And this Uncle Red, Gary,
beer swilling Uncle Red.
Gary Busey, man, at his most wonderful Buseyness. This is Busey before going way off the deep end, but this is Busey as Busey. It's so good. Come on, it's Busey. And
it's certainly not him at his best.
No.
Can't give you that, because he's good in stuff. He's good in Point Break. Sure. He's good in he's actually good in things.
Actor, and you could not tell it from Silver Bullet.
Right. Oh, come on! I thought he was. Oh man. Okay, go ahead.
The Buseyness is turned up to 11. We can all agree on that, at least.
Okay, sure. I had not seen this in probably 30 years. I don't remember much. The thing that was interesting is that
shut up, Joel,
is, as terrible as it was, I sort of liked it by the end, which is hard to kind of
I had the same reaction. I have the same reaction every time I watch Silver Bullet,
because
it's incompetent film. It's not good filmmaking at all. It looked, and I hate to say this, budget constraints, it looked really cheap to me. Yeah.
Like in the choices made for the filmmaking, it looked clunky and unpolished. And it's sad, because I think, Corey Haim at that age was adorable and amazing. And he's really actually good in this.
Megan Follows is really good in it too. The two of them sort of act circles around the older adult characters.
Oh, for sure. Opinion. But it was just, I think a big problem with it was the music was terrible. And I realized as I looked it up, I'm like, this is the same guy that did the music for The Inner Light, Star Trek: The Next Generation. He came up with, Picard's flute thing. I'm like, how do you have that? And then you also have Silver Bullet, which always felt so weird to me. No, it just, that's what's strange. I liked it. I didn't like it, but by the end, I'm like, it was kind of fun. That's all I can really say. It was enjoyable, but not well made.
Watching it again this time, I felt like this could have been a good low budget horror movie if you hadn't cast Gary Busey. because he just took me out of the film. He just doesn't act like a real person.
No, he doesn't.
So
He doesn't.
over the
But I
top
really
and
think the film's from the kid's perspective, and I think
terrible.
it's winning in that way. The Stephen King's adaptation of his own material is weird because he has
He's not
this
a good
weird.
screenwriter. Yeah.
Well, he has this weird, like, I'm writing this girl looking back on the summer of her childhood.
Oh, the narration.
There's
was
all this
awful.
strange Ray Bradbury-esque like winsomeness to it, and then there's just these brutal, nasty werewolf splatter effects in it, and and this sort of weird, like Stephen's typical weird religious sort of aversions also play into this. I enjoy Gary in it. I don't know. You guys hate him. That's cool. But I think he's fun in it. He sucks, but he's fun in it. He's fun in it, and the movie can use a little fun. Terry O'Quinn is pretty fun in it. I think Everett McGill's actually pretty fun in it too. Yep. So, and Kent Broadhurst, the always appropriately named Kent Broadhurst, not quite the recognizable name amongst these other guys, but whenever he shows up, man, and has to panic or freak out about something.
Which character was he?
He was the guy whose son is killed.
Oh my God. Yeah. He was actually pretty good, but then
he goes good in off the hook, turned up to 100 sort of way, which is all Kent knows how to do. Kent Broadhurst. Again, I will repeat his name for you. Yes. May the name of Broadhurst suggest a broad performance coming to a theater screen near you soon. I thought all that was fun and stupid. I thought the terrible attack of the werewolf out in the woods with the awful face torn up and it just all is terrible. And he seems to capture only the worst cuts of each performance, and they all seem to go into the movie in the most clumsy way. This was a first-time filmmaker who I think sucks, and I think his career has sort of shown that. But
it's his only feature film. He did.
But the only thing and even Chataway's music, which I get what you're saying. How can he be so good at one thing and bad at another? Well, it's simple. It's because Chataway's good at music, and he sort of sucks at being an element in a film. And even his Star Trek work is very much that way. He's very, listen to me, I'm doing the music. That's how all his episodes are. When he was asked to write this very pretty thing that's very musical and lyrical, he nailed it because he's a really good musician, but he's a pretty crappy underscore artist, if you ask me. What I like about, and then I'll shut up. What I like about Silver Bullet is it feels like everybody's trying. Busey's trying. The kids are giving it a go. The makeup artist starts putting it up in front of the screen. The director's got everything paced crazy and maniacally. And I, just as a point of comparison, I really, really appreciate the effort. And by the time it's over, I'm kind of like, it's bad, but it's that good kind of bad that I can kind of get behind. And that was my reaction to when I saw it on TV late one night several years ago. And the widescreen high definition does not help it. Crop it, make it blurrier. That makes it better in a weird, crazy way. It makes it cheaper and shittier, and you can digest it a little easier. Like, with all the warts and all hanging out there in high def, it really did.
That's I think the takeaway is, like, as terrible as it is, I didn't hate it, but I even admired it. A little bit. You know what the moment was where I'm like, wow, this looks like it was made for 5 cents. The fog sequence. I'm like, this is terrible. This looks awful. It's like, did you try and fake that you're on a soundstage? Because that's it. It just little things like that take you out of it when you're looking at it. And it's like, I'm not buying it.
I also love my favorite scene is the werewolf fever dream. That's great. I love it. I love and my favorite is the organist in the fever dream. And doing almost.
I believe that's Jay Chataway's mom.
Is it really?
No, awesome. I'm just making stuff up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that.
And I had a blast watching it again.
Stephen King, Rob, what do you think?
Well, it's a novella. I talked to you when I
that's no excuse, Rob.
And it was originally supposed to be a calendar, and he was just supposed to write these little vignettes, and he found that too constricting. So he wrote out a novella and published it with the art of Bernie Wrightson.
I see.
The whole book, I have it here,
Yay!
is filled with pictures. It's 128 pages. That's including the title page and the afterword. Total, there's got to be like 70 pages of text or whatever. So it's very much a long short story. Novella is almost pushing it. And when he works in that format, he's going more for the horror. That's not my favorite aspect of Stephen King. My favorite aspect of Stephen King is his characters and the relationships and the bond you make with them. I don't even think of him as a horror writer first and foremost.
Outside the two kids, there's not a lot of that going on.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. That feels clunky, even though both performers are great.
It is badly written.
And they had to ruin it when they say "I love you" at the end, and then the narration comes in. I'm like, oh God, you just killed it.
Michael, what did you think of Gary Busey?
Fine, exactly what I anticipated. It's like just over the top, but I don't know who said it. It's like it's just I couldn't connect with him because it was just too much.
Yeah,
it's like even the way he grabs Corey Haim to kiss him, I'm like, okay, it's just weird.
It's like he doesn't know how to act. Like
I guess.
I think it felt like somebody put a video camera up. Like, let's get the neighborhood kids together and let's make a movie. We don't know anything about movie making because we're 10. And so everybody just stand in front of it and say your stuff. It's like they had to do that with him because I don't know. He just screeches his line.
Here's what I would say.
He feels dangerous. Like on set.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Sure. I guess it's always worked for me because he's always seemed like a guy who has no idea what to do around kids. And yet he loves them because he has no kids of his own and his life is a mess.
Jake Busey and Corey Haim hung out on the set of this film. This was the movie that made Jake want to do movies. So
I don't mean Gary Busey doesn't have kids. I meant the character doesn't have
Uncle
kids.
Red doesn't have
Uncle
kids.
Red doesn't have kids, and so these are his his only outlet to children. Yet he doesn't know how to relate to them at all.
Well, and he's a big dumb child himself in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is trying to pretend to be an adult.
Yeah,
some of that is in the movie, but it is.
And so that's why I guess I forgive I forgive a lot of what I'm hearing as stuff that doesn't work. It worked fine for me. And I paired it with a movie that just came out called Werewolves Within, which is 2021 movie starring Sam Richardson, it's about a forest ranger who gets assigned to a small town in the Redwood, and and people start dying, and
I didn't dislike the film, but it didn't work on all cylinders for me. Like the production values were great, performances were good, the actors were engaging, but it just tried to be more clever than it was. Like the dialogue was always trying too hard to be goofy, and it just kind of took me out of it. But I mean, like the effects were good. I mean, I can't really say anything bad about basically everything other than it just didn't work. It just was not quite, it was too clever for its own good.
It was very much, I would agree with that. It was very much trying to, as Ryan warned me, if this is like a hipster comedy horror film, he was never going to forgive me. And I expect that I will never be forgiven. Because that's exactly what it was. And I chose it sight unseen. I hadn't seen it. It's not like this was a movie I saw and like, oh my God, you guys got to see it. I thought it had some interesting people in it and I wanted to give it a go.
I'll let Rob go next. Rob had a somewhat charitable reaction to it too, I thought.
Yeah, I did. I went in with super low expectations. And when I was done, like, I don't love this film. I ranked all the double feature films and it's number 7 for me. But
what did it beat?
Silver Bullet.
Oh.
Which again isn't terrible. I'm glad I watched it again. I got things out of it. It's better than I remembered it being. But this one, it doesn't add up. But it had moments, and Sam Richardson and Milana
Weintraub.
Yeah, I
Weintraub,
really
yeah.
liked them. I liked their relationship.
Mhm.
That kept me in the film at times where I probably would have checked out more. I really liked Sam Richardson. I had
Yeah.
never seen him in anything, I don't think.
Well, that's a big reason I think Joel recommended it. It's hard not to like Sam Richardson, but
Yeah, I mean,
it's not enough. I mean, that's
I
not
wouldn't
enough.
recommend this film, but I don't begrudge the time I spent with it.
No.
And I've
My time's not terribly valuable, but I do, and this is why. It's a comedy that's not funny. It's a horror movie that's not scary. It's abhorrently violent for no reason other than to make you jolt, which if it gets you once, that's enough. And there's 8 other times where someone's head gets blown off or someone's limb gets blown up or somebody, whatever. The script is lazy and awful. These people were all given this chance, and there's no crime that you made a crappy movie, because it's not, like you guys said, the effects are pretty good. It's not an incompetent movie. The camera work, especially when they're outside, is well done, if I'm trying to look for something nice to say about it. But I just feel like this is everything I hate about movies now. You don't care about any of these people. You're not supposed to. Movie doesn't want you to give a lick about anybody. You might find our hero, somewhat sympathetic, whatever, but he's this weird old-fashioned sitcom character working alongside this, what's her face, Lily from the AT&T commercials. And you're watching it going, this just all artifice, it's all superficial. It's all just to make you giggle, but I didn't giggle ever. And it's gross and mean and awful. And that's what these films are when they're not scary or when they don't mean anything. When you literally line people up to get all chopped up and chewed out for no reason other than light entertainment, you are throwing, you're either throwing human beings to the wolves, or you're throwing, like this movie, you're not even trying to make them human beings. You don't want the audience to feel anything. You certainly don't feel any romance. You don't feel any horror when anybody dies, even if it's somebody that you think you like. It's all garbage. It's the worst kind of content filler that is out there. And for that reason, even though it's hard to hate because it's harmless enough, and I do forgive you, Joel. I don't forgive anybody involved in the making of Werewolves Within, but I owed you one. So this is it. You get this one.
Well,
next time you suggest a movie that I have to watch for the show that you haven't seen yet, you better be damn sure.
Well, there's
But
a
other
reason
than that-
why I very rarely suggest films.
Well, it's like the same reason I don't get CDs for Christmas presents, because nobody.
Well, but the thing is,
disagree.
horror comedies are notoriously difficult to do.
But you can do them.
I know my benchmark.
But it starts with you trying to be scary and funny,
Yes,
and
my
not just
benchmark-
blowing everything off.
The benchmark is always for me Shaun of the Dead. It works on every single level. It's funny, it's terrifying, it's emotional, it's wonderful. I don't know why people that are going to go out there and do a horror comedy, like that's your concept, that's what you're going to be hired to do.
Right.
Why don't you go look at Shaun of the Dead as an indicator of how to do it properly? I mean, obviously you don't want to take beat by beat because then you're just plagiarizing, but I'm saying, how did this succeed? Because we cared about all these people. They're hysterically funny. It's also terrifying, emotional, because we care about everyone. I think that's the big thing. And
That's
I agree.
the thing that's entirely missing from Werewolves
You
Within.
don't. I mean, they're goofy
There's
enough,
some
they're funny
charisma
enough.
there in places, but there's no effort to make any of them matter to you, because the film just wants to wipe them all out, and it really doesn't want you contemplating what that even means. And if that's where your starting point is, then why on earth should we go along with you?
That's what bothers me about films that look good. They obviously had a budget. You had some name actors. You had people, then write a script that is going to accommodate the fact that you have budgets and people that are noteworthy. And but it's always the thing. It's like that stupid old saying, it has to start on the page, and that didn't happen here.
No, I don't think so.
I have to disagree with one thing you said, Ryan. Pretty much only one thing. The other things but it didn't offend me as much as it did.
Right.
Is that there's no romance, because I actually really liked the relationship between the budding relationship, the romance, the romantic comedy aspect. For some reason, those two performers were just engaging in a way that I really liked. I really liked their give and take.
That's why Joel suggested
I was really disappointed in the twist at the end.
And the twist at the end, if you were buying into it, which I wasn't, but if you were buying into it all, the twist, such as it is, should spoil it all. And I will say, Joel, though, that as a double feature, they're both werewolf whodunits. Like, there's a lot of parallels and stuff. It's a pretty damn good double feature from a thematic and structural standpoint. So
if you like crappy movies, if you like crappy movies,
big pieces of crap too. I think one shows you how just a little heart wins the day somehow, at least in spots in Silver Bullet. And this film over here has no heart. It has no heart. It's a send up and aloof. It's not. It's wanting to entertain you, which is not an evil thing to do. So I don't want to go too overboard, but it just.
Yeah,
just do better. Just do better. Put something of. You don't have to be serious like I like things or poetic about everything, but put something in it, something of yourself, some heart. Just not just I saw a werewolf movie once and here's a jokey version of one. That's not enough. Do better than that. For God, love of God, just please try. I don't even feel the effort in that film. The actors are, they're decent enough, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the end. It doesn't help. If anything, it makes what you're talking about, Rob, more disappointing when you actually get to the bitter end of the thing, because it's all for naught. It's for nothing. There's nothing here.
Yeah, except that's the
But
twist.
I think that Sam Richardson and the Mountain Man, they could become a thing, right? They had some rapport.
Maybe that's where.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for Werewolves Within, but they're still standing at the end, so maybe
wishful thinking.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so
that's a sequel that I might show up for, Michael.
Okay, that is our creepy, spooktacular double feature episode.
We kind of ran out of time. We don't get to do our big Q&A, but does anybody have a quick round table question for everybody just about these horror movies or about double features in general, Rob?
Well, I
don't think this can be a proper segment, but maybe we can end on a different note than Werewolves Within sucks and everybody who works on it should be fired.
Okay, here's my question. So we're doing horror double features. We all have different relationships with horror. Michael is horror man, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have grown into an appreciation for it with certain subsections. I like classic horror, I like Hammer films, and I've come to appreciate some other things. Joel, you were sort of more into the slasher films when you were younger, if I remember.
That's true. That is true. Yeah,
first episodes and stuff like that. Ryan is sort of not the horror guy. Why
I've seen more horror movies than a lot of people, but you're right.
Yeah,
I'm not a horror guy.
Them, but
it's true.
You really don't want to do a horror themed episode unless there's a way in that you can be positive.
Yeah, you won't get a countdown of top 10 Jason Voorhees murders.
Right.
Yay.
Right.
No, you will not.
Why are we all that way? Ryan, was there a film that you saw too early that really turned you off and you just put a block against it?
No, it's not the films. It's what I just talked about. It's the bloodlust. It's sitting in a room full of my friends when I was a teenager, when things are hard and you have all these anxieties and stuff, and just watching them all revel in these people getting eviscerated and killed, watching them enjoy that and giggle at that and laugh at it. When I was a kid, I found that abhorrent. I hated it so much. So the films of that era in particular, I really can't stand. It helps that they're not great. There aren't a lot of really good artistic achievements back there. I have gone back and tried to hit on the pillars of things. We talked about, I thought I talked pretty lovingly about Black Christmas, which at the time I would never have liked. But now that I'm watching it as a cinema fan and not in that ugly setting, I can take it as that, and then now I can appreciate it as that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be another film where I would never have accepted that in that setting, whereas now I can watch it and be sort of amazed by how good it is. So I've evolved a lot in a way. When Joel and Michael first met me, I really you were at the end of the 80s. It was all put upon jokey, punchliney crap. It's all Nightmare on Elm Streets and Chucky and just all it. And it's all this crap is coming back too, which is makes my head just hurt. It hurts. I hated that stuff. So when they met me, like something like Candyman or something, which we all watched together, and a few other things, I just was very, very resistant to it. I think I've gotten more. I think it's a testament to Michael that he even was like my pal and liked me at all, because I really hated horror movies, like a lot when at that time, and I'm much more open to them now. But I'm open to them as movies, and I can appreciate them as art, and I can watch them sort of here in this own setting. I've talked about it a million times before, man. The Saw movie commercials where it's night vision and they're just showing the audience jump into each other's laps. Like if you've watched a Saw movie, what's on screen in front of you is this repugnant, awful stuff. And I can take any level of repugnant, awful stuff if it's respected for what it is. And I will, and I'll accept it on that level, and I'll even relish the chance to go through a dark experience like that with cinema if that's what you give me. If it's just date movie jumps, and that's why you enjoy people losing their limbs or watching their children die, or if that's what you're into, then I just kind of don't like you. And that's kind of how I've always been. And like I say, what do they politicians say? My opinions about horror movies have evolved. My thinking has evolved on the subject. Like it truly has, and I'm grateful for that. But I didn't like that, man. I didn't like that. I didn't like that they were all into it and that thought it was a big joke. I just find mortality and humanity, I don't like seeing them effed around with for laughs and for cheap punchlines and for cheap gags. I hate it. And I still hate it to this day, but at least I can take it a little differently. Sorry for the super long-winded speech of an answer. Michael, why do you love horror movies?
I like to be
It's because it's for similar reasons I hated them, that you were able to escape into them in ways from sort of the similar kinds of pressures than things that I was going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I liked being scared, but it's such a perverse thing when you think about it, that when it really all started is I was so terrified by things that I still have nightmares about them to this day. So I don't understand if it's just sort of like a defense mechanism or something along those lines, but I don't know. I mean, it's where I want to be. Even, I'm talking about that article. It's like, even though I'm getting soft in my old age, it's still where I'd want to be, watching all these new movies these past 3 days. I love that I'm experiencing new things. I mean, you'd think after all these years I'd seen everything. I'm like, not even close. I just like being there, and I like to be scared and intrigued. And I think it kind of goes to my writing as well, is like, I like to put people in a position where it's basically hopeless, and then you have to figure a way to get them out of it, based on who they are as a person. And I love when horror is character driven. I think that's more interesting, because if what you said earlier, if I care about them, then it doesn't matter what's going to happen. Yeah, is it ultra violent? Yeah, I'll get past it because I like the characters, And I think overall, I think it's the stakes in horror. I mean, there's no bigger thing than life and death. So to go into that every time you watch a horror film is interesting. It's like there's no easy way out here. And I think it's fun to see people try and, I think that's why I love Final Girls so much. I love seeing people being resourceful and using their brain. And one of the things I've said about my own writing and really good horror is, I don't like the cliches, but if you can put someone into this position and the audience is like not saying, oh my God, you stupid idiot. They're like, that's what I would have done. And then it still doesn't work. That's brilliant writing. And that doesn't happen that often. I like to see people get out of it, but they got to really work for it. And I think that's part of it. I think it's the struggle of seeing these characters. And, but I mean, it is just old fashioned. It's fun to be scared. So.
Joel?
I just want to quick point out that I also would have aimed the rocket at the eye of the attacking. So that's I hear what you're saying, Michael. No, I mean, no, for me, it's I think when I was younger, when it was just that it was it was just the basic good versus evil. It looks like evil's going to win, and then good triumphs at the end. I mean, it was I for whatever reason, sure, I was completely desensitized to the violence, and so it was just like, oh yeah, well, it wasn't about. I did not think about the death. It was about what creative way are they going to have someone die, and so it was, there nothing was real. It was all fantastical, and so I think that's why. And then I kind of grew out of it just because my interests changed, and frankly I wasn't going to the movies or watching movies as much. And so when it came time to when I did have time to watch a movie, there were other things that I prioritized. So I mean, he was I think that's kind of where horror ranks for me.
Good question, Rob. Right?
Do you guys feel real quick, do you guys is it hard with everything going on and all of demands placed on our time, whether it's with work or with family or with whatever, do you find it hard to dedicate the time to a double feature?
No.
Watching a couple movies in a night?
No. It's if I really want to make it happen, it'll probably happen.
Yeah.
2 weeks from now, I don't know what the hell we're gonna do next week, audience. So no tease for next week, but 2 weeks from now, 23-ish scary movies from this year. We're gonna go through them one by one, just like we do every year, the day after Halloween. And so no, I wish. So a bit of a deep thought. I wish I had something pulling me someplace else to do anything else. But I don't have that. So this is what I've got, and it's what I turn to. And no, I watched every one of these double features as double features in order with a popcorn break in between. And I mean, I did it all because I could, and I could have watched 2 double features in one evening if I'd really buckled down and focused. Like I got nothing but time to hang out and watch these movies, and then blessing, I have this chance to talk with Joel about them every weekend. I wrote a little bit about that on my own wall last week. So however bad things are, it's neat to be able to do this and to talk about the things you're passionate about. And it's super cool to have friends like Rob and Michael who have their own passions that they bring to the show. Like, we're really, really lucky to be able to do that. And so I may lament that I'd like to be able to go to the basketball game with someone, or I would like to be able to go to my kid's soccer game, or I would like to be able to do anything some nights, just go out to eat with another person who cares what I think that isn't on the podcast, but I don't have that. So I got TV, I got movies and TV and music. That's what I spend all my time with. Well, because just sitting here with my own thoughts would be intolerable.
To expound on what you're saying, though, Joel, too, about fitting that in a double feature in, it's actually easier, I think, for me to fit a double feature in because, like, hey, tonight we're watching movies.
Yeah, here we're setting the schedule aside.
The next
Plus,
night,
Rob, look where you are with your popcorn machine in the background. You're in the movie room. Yeah. Like anyone who gets involved with Rob and gets married to him and has kids with him gets it. This is part of the deal. And Michael is certainly true of you. Am I right? Yeah. Look at this. Look at the collection. And I mean, this is part of the deal. We're going to be doing this. You did it. You did it for a living for a long time, and we don't have time, but that's my question for you, Michael. Someday we're going to talk about that in a proper segment where we give ourselves 15, 20 minutes. The difference between watching these movies and talking about them with your friends like this and having screeners sent to you and watching them pile up and knowing you have to watch them and then you have to write about them whether you want to or not. And what the difference is between it being your passion and it being your job. Because I know for you that for me, it's been a little bit both. For you, it's been completely both. for a long period of time. But that we got to leave it there. That's a teaser for a future show or over time. But you guys, Rob, this was an awesome idea. Thank
Rob,
you, everybody, for coming on.
It was spooktacular, Rob. Oh, thank you.
If anyone
Rob
has a good idea for next week, let us know.
Don't be afraid to tell us your good ideas, listeners.
Please don't.
All right, that is going to do it for this week. Rob, Michael, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
As always, it is delightful to see you in small square box form. All right, you can reach out to us at The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can always, if you're on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button, tell your friends, and you can email us at Ask Joel and Ryan. At askjoelandryan@gmail.com. It's those ats, the at. askjoelandryan@gmail.com. That is going to do it for us for this week. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.